fit. So get ready for another dynamic journey. Good morning, Chicago. Welcome to the Wake Up Show, Chicago. My name is Dr. Larry Ivory, and I am the President CEO of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce and Chairman of the Board of the National Black Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. I am excited again for another day that we get a chance to engage in some healthy talk about Black economic empowerment, something that will impose a question that will lead you to your better understanding. Hey, and I'm excited too that I have the one and only Dr. LaDonna Raeh, who's with me as our producer. LaDonna does a little bit of everything, and I'm just excited that she's a part of the family. She also has her own radio show with her colleague. So, LaDonna, glad to have you on with us today. And what say you?
All right, I know that's right. Thank you very much, Dr. Larry Ivory. Well, welcome to the Wake Up Show, everybody. We're in Chicago. It's hot. We had a storm last night, but we weathered the storm. How about that? This show is powered by the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce and, of course, sponsored by Wind Creek, Chicago, Southland. Each and every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., we're coming to you live on WVON 1690 and streaming around the world. You can catch us on iHeart no matter where you are. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just look for at Wake Up Show Chicago. And of course, if you want to get in on this conversation, call 773-591-1690 because we're live. Make sure you share that show. Also, go to our website, ilbcc.org, because it's all about the chamber. If you go to our website, you will see how to become a member, what the benefits are when you do become a member. And before we dive into today's discussion, I definitely want to tell you guys happy 4th of July
July.
or happy 15th day after Juneteenth or happy 4th of July. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Hey, LaDonna, let me also take a moment to give our condolences to the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, who lost his First Lady. Our hearts go out to him and the Nation of Islam, and just wish everybody the best. And she was greatly loved and just a tremendous woman. So
Let's
our
let's
hearts
say
go
her
out to
name.
her.
Let's say her name. Mother Khadijah
Lisa,
Farrakhan.
yes,
Absolutely. Mother of grace. Okay. Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Hey,
All right,
we
you got
have,
somebody on for with us.
yeah, we do. We have none other than our data scientist, the go-to guy for the chamber when it comes to anything on research. If we want to know how many grains of sand is on the beach, we call this guy because he's a data scientist. He does the numbers, he follows the information, and he takes it to heart. So I'm excited to have the one and only Universal. We just call him Universal, but he's on the show with us today, and we're gonna delve into some data and some information, and we may have Dr. Michael Crowley, who may be joining us if he can get on. But we're gonna have a good conversation on facts and information. And again, it is a Fourth of July, and there's a lot to be said even about that when you come and take a look at the history of America. And a lot of people aren't overly familiar with the 7 Year War before we fought for independence, when we were fighting with Britain against the Indians and the French. And then after that, we flipped, and America and the colonists decided that they wanted their freedom because of taxation without representation and a whole lot of other issues. And the French began to fight with us in order to defeat Britain. So there's a lot of history that goes back into this country that's only 250 years old.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Is any are Universal and LaDonna? Are you familiar with the 7 Year War? but
No,
they had.
I want you to tell me about the 7 year war. I'm not going to even cheat and look it up. Please tell me.
I'm not as well. They always say I have two ears to listen.
Well,
And
the 7 year war was a war when Britain was fighting against the Indians, the Native Americans, and the indigenous, well, the Native Americans and the French.
I didn't
There
know
was
that
a
was called
war
the
that
seven
went,
year war.
yeah, it was called the 7 Year War.
Huh, okay.
And they fought uh, in order to, control the land because America was not discovered, but, I guess you say taken or something to that degree. And
Acquired.
yeah, whatever you want to call it, hostile takeover, from the corporate America, hostile takeover. But the fact of the matter is that there was this war uh, that basically was about control, and once that war was over, it was not long after that the colonists decide, look, we then fought and the war was so expensive that the crown and the king had to raise some money because the war was expensive, no different than the war in the US. If you fight a war, it costs a lot of money, a lot of resources. If you have to have ships to sail over and fight in a country, so it was a very expensive war for the British. And the British was taxing, they felt they had no other choice to begin to tax the 13 colonies. And so they began to tax them with a number of taxes. The stamp tax, you had the stamp tax, you had the tea, you had the Boston tea taxation without representation. And it was their way of raising money. And the colonies felt like, we were from England because they considered themselves not Americans, but England, that they were from Britain.
This sounds
And
like tariffs, Larry. So what you're referring to was what used to be tariffs, and then later it became taxes for the American citizens. Am I correct?
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. And they had a problem with that, quite frankly. And therein lies the division between Ben Franklin, which was a statesman that represented the U.S., and others. And it was through that taxation and not having representation that the war was started between Britain. And as the war continued, they were outmatched, outclassed in terms of the Britain's enormous fighting power. But as the war went on, and George Washington and others fought in the war, the French, who had was always interested in winning against the British, decided to join the Americans, and therein lies the battle that pursued, and eventually the cost was so great that there was the independence of the U.S. And there's a long story behind that. It's
Yeah.
fascinating history
You know,
because I think
Britain is only about Britain, and that's how they began. When it came to like the 13 colonies and any other body of people, Britain was all about themselves, no matter what.
well, Britain was it was a monarchy.
Yeah.
You had a very few people who had a lot of wealth, and the common people, basically did what they were told to do to some degree. But it was a united Britain was the economic power in the region, and quite frankly, people can agree to disagree. They were taxing the colonists, very much different than they were taxing the people in Britain. And Britain was paying a larger portion of the taxes, and they simply said, "Look, let's take some of that burden from here and let's share that with our other citizens over in America at that point in time." So it's an interest here. Once you get into it, you'll find you'll see the transgression, or you'll see the evolution of America. And what was interesting most of all, that even when you get into slavery and everything else, because the British had, the islands and where they made all their money from, was they had the southern colonists had made more money because they had more slaves, and basically they understood that the more slaves you had, the more profitable it was to Britain. And so the
Absolutely.
southern states had more slaves, and the Caribbean states were even more productive because they had 90% of the population who were black, and they made more money in those places than any place in the world.
Why does
And
this
that's
sound like like America right now? You know, if you think about it, almost what? How much percent of our wages go towards the government? Not 24, not 26, not 50, but 70. Because we're paying tax on top of tax on top of tax off of our earned wages. You know what I'm saying? Like we pay an employee tax to the government, to the state, but then we're also buying goods that have been taxed and passed on. And then those items have been taxed and passed on and we're paying for that.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there is some debate, that everybody understands is that the rise and falls of great countries. You don't always, Rome didn't stay on top forever.
Right.
Britain didn't stay on top forever. And now the question is whether America will stay on top of it. And it was always about war and debt and finances. And if you take a look at Britain's issue, it was always about the money, just like it is about the money still. And when you go back and take a look at the Caribbean um, cities and the Caribbeans, they were controlled by the British, and they were the most profitable parts of where they got their money because that's where they had the slaves.
Yeah.
Majority of the people were slaves there. They made a lot of money, and slavery was a very profitable part of economics for them.
It still is.
Yeah, still is, still is. Same game,
Same
just a
game,
different strategy.
different look.
But let me ask. Universal and I have been playing with some numbers. Universal, you got some data in reference to the number of African American businesses in the state of Illinois, hot off the presses, as well as the amount, not only the number of business, but you also have the number of businesses that have employees, and you also have the same thing with Hispanics. Give us some idea, Universal, in terms of those numbers, because I want to get into this conversation, as much as possible.
Hey, Wake Up Show family, Dr. Ivory and Dr. LaDonna Raeh. I want to thank you guys for having me on with you today. Before we jump into the numbers, I think it's important to really shed some light on why data, why research. I think, especially within the community, it may not be as important or as glamorous as many of the uh, subject matter experts out there, but I think it's worthy the attention and the highlight. So when we talk about data, it can be very usable daily in our daily lives. For an example, when you get in your car, right? You're looking at your gas needle. You may look at when your oil comes on. That data is giving you intelligence.
Mm.
Intelligence for what? Right? Intelligence so that you're not stranded on the side of the road because and you see it indicates to you that you are low on gas, and if you don't put some gas in your car, you're going to be stuck someplace trying to figure out how to recover. Same thing with oil, right? Let's take this another step further. When you go and visit your doctor, right? When you go to the doctor's office, the first thing they'll do for you is they'll check your vitals. Well, why are they checking your vitals? They're checking your vitals so that they can see your numbers. They're looking at the data to see where you are, and so that they know how to respond to the numbers that's being present. So we always say, know your numbers. If it's high blood pressure, if it's, if you're checking your sugar, you're checking your blood sugar, or if you're just make sure you're checking your BP, making sure you don't have high blood pressure or your weight. So as it relates to where we are right now, especially when we
Hey,
start talking,
Universal, let me
yes,
interrupt you just for a second because I want to draw LaDonna right into this conversation because what you said makes so much sense. LaDonna, how does that apply to marketing and advertising, the data? Do you use data in your business in terms of what does that mean when you're trying to target a market, data means something, correct?
Oh, absolutely. You don't know where you're going until you know where you're at. And a lot of times, let's just start with the marketing piece of that. It's you have to do an assessment of what the business is projected to, or their aspirational goals, as far and as well as their inspirational goals. So if you work with a business that has needs some marketing efforts, or in need of marketing efforts, first that has to be assessed, and you can't assess what they need to do until you know where they are. So, to Universal's point, how much revenue do you bring in? How much have you? How much came in last year? How much comes in quarterly, monthly? And then you take that number and you decide, okay, how much are your services and products? If is your goal a dollar amount? Is your goal an expandable amount? Is it to increase number of employees or productivity? So every aspect of what type of marketing is needed needs to be assessed. So the numbers do matter, and the starting point is very important. I'm dealing with a business right now that's gathering their numbers. They haven't always been the best at bookkeeping, and I won't take too much of your time. But they haven't been the best at bookkeeping, and a lot of times they still have these old school customers that come in and pay cash, and that's not always accounted for. What that does is that hurts the business, because now you don't know where you could have been if that had been accounted for. So we're going to have to take the aggregate number of their overall electronic transactions and then divide it up and kind of guesstimate a number. But the increase is necessary to track. Return on investment is important when you charge for marketing services. If you don't know how much that person has grown towards their goal, then you're really not doing marketing.
Yeah. Let me just mention this, and we're going to toss it back to our expert.
Sure.
Is that Doctor, because we understand how important that is to the business growth and development, we partner with Dr. Erica Blakely, who has an incredible service. She has done accounting for Fortune 100 companies. She is just a phenomenal young lady, and she is giving to our members $100 a month, and that gets your personal taxes done and your business taxes done for the whole year, as well as all your financial statements and training. It's a phenomenal service. She was also offering just before April, where businesses could come in and get their personal and business taxes done for close to only $600. That was just unheard of. I'm like, you can't do that. That's impossible. But she has a non for profit. If you belong to the chamber, we can connect you with some incredible service, because we understand that you need uh, good accounting services and good data in order to grow your business. So, Universal, passing the ball back to you.
Well, wait, before you pass the ball, let me get back to Dr. Erica Blakely, because I know for a fact that it costs me between $2,000 and $4,000 to get my business taxes done every year. So that's a steal. I just wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. Universal, take us home, man. Tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the intel, so the reason behind data is so that you can have the intelligence necessary, you can have the intel to be able to know how to move with what's going on with the numbers. So in this case, working with the chamber, we had the question come up, and maybe we can throw this out there to the audience, right? But we had the question come up: how many black-owned businesses are there presently inside of Illinois? And what we did was we did a breakdown of that. We did a breakdown of how many black-owned companies in Illinois, and between the companies, black-owned companies that have employees. So the numbers tell a very different story. But I mean, LaDonna, what you think? If we were to say, how many businesses in Illinois, black-owned businesses in Illinois that are that that are black-owned businesses without employees?
I
If you threw a percentage out there, 10%, 20%, well, what would you throw out there? What would you think that falls?
I'd say about 90%.
Okay,
I'm going high.
okay,
90% without employees. No,
Hey,
I'll give it about 80%.
okay, okay. And Doc, would you like to throw something out there just to
well,
entertain?
you can't ask me a question I already know the answer to.
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say
see.
that's an unfair
And
advantage.
LaDonna knows the answer too. But
Yeah.
the point is that when we ask people and we tell people the number you're going to give them, most African Americans and Caucasians don't really realize that we have that many black businesses in the state of Illinois, which is the third largest concentration of black businesses within the United States of America. Go ahead, Universal.
So when we look at the count, we're looking at 183,000, and from percentage wise, that
What's that number again, man?
183,000. This is black-owned businesses without employees. And if we look at, some of you may not be able to will be able to see the bigger picture around having the percentages. So what that looks like percentage-wise, that is 96%. As a matter of fact, it's 96.9%. So LaDonna, you're right on top, even though being generous, right? What does this mean? What does this tell us, right? This tells us that, huh, we have a very large population of black-owned businesses that don't have employees. Now,
Mm.
the opposite side of that, right? Well, if there's 96% of solopreneurs that we have in the black community in terms of business in the black business community, what is the makeup of the black-owned businesses with employees?
That about 3 point something percent.
And you hit the nail right on top of the head.
I
We're
mean,
looking at
I would have just said 4%, but yeah.
Yeah.
so generous, right? So we're at 3%, 3.1%, and what that looks like, is 5,943
So so so
businesses.
so Universal, you're telling me that we have approximately 188,000. Of the 188,000, we have close to 83,000 solopreneurs, 183,000 solopreneurs, and a very small percentage of companies who have employees. And based upon our work with Tony, who's the head of remote works, he pointed out that the SBA pointed out, and these are the SBA's numbers, is that if you're a solopreneur, here's the amount of money you make. It is around $60,000, give or take. But when you add employees, you add three or four employees, that number goes up to a half a million. If you add more than that, that number goes up to a couple million. So there's a direct correlation between employees and revenue and success. So that's important. So I yield back to you, man.
No,
Well, I
I
want to. Can I jump in? I'm so sorry.
that's fine.
I keep stealing your ball.
No, you good, you good.
But I'm thinking about what goes along with that is that when you start a business, you're starting the business for either passion or money or your discipline. And we as African Americans, blacks, whatever we are, this administration, we want to get started. Like we are doers. We really are. We're doers. But I also learned that we are project based doers. So we are most passionate about finishing and completing something that we're actually interested in. And when we're interested in something like the business itself, we tend to fall in line or in the realm of working in our business instead of working on our business. If we worked on our business, we would be able to hire someone not just to get coffee, but we would have a standard operating procedural book to go by so that we can train additional employees. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that as well. To Pred's point about SBA, SBA stands for Small Business Association, and this data is it's public data, right? The thing is, who's asking the right questions to be able to investigate, to be able to understand it, not only just to interpret it, but begin to work in a strategical way to be able to solve a problem that we're going to get to why the chamber decided to make this move to talk about this issue and to bring it to light because there's a solution behind it, right? We find the opportunities in the crisis. But back to your point, though, Perez.
Universal. Let me interrupt because I know when it comes to, in college you do the economic comparison and things in that category. The how do that's okay if everybody else, because when you're running the 100-yard dash, you're comparing yourself to everybody. If you run it in 14 minutes, I mean, you run it in, 14 seconds, well, you're not in the top, at all in terms of the fastest. So you want to really be able to compare. How do other races compare? As an example, how does the Latinos and the Hispanics compare in terms of number of business and the number of solopreneurs and those who have employees? Give us some sense. Are we right around the same in terms of the numbers? So we can say, okay, this we're doing okay in comparison to this. So so give me some perspective on that.
Absolutely, that's a very wonderful question, right? And the question is speaking to where do we fit in the big picture,
Yeah.
right? Because if we're looking at our numbers, total of 188,000 approximately, and 88,000 businesses together as a collective of like businesses, right? How do we compare to the Hispanic, and how do we compare to the white community, business community? So when we look at let's say Hispanic owned businesses without employees, 165,000 businesses without employees.
What's the
Well,
total
hold
number
on.
of businesses?
So no, because you're going for nationwide. So give us
No, no,
some
no, no,
sense.
no. This is just Illinois.
No, no, they don't have 660,000. I can tell you that now. Their numbers were 150,000 of
Oh yeah,
Hispanic
yeah,
businesses.
yeah. I
Sorry.
see. Yep, yep, yep. So with employees,
Okay. So let's go back to the questions
Yeah.
because I don't want to confuse our audience. When we take a look at Hispanic businesses, we have 188,000. I thought their numbers were 150 something thousand, give or take a couple thousand, either one way or the
And
other, but
you're
about
talking about
50,000.
Hispanics. Hispanics have 150 something thousand, or
Correct.
okay,
In comparison to our 188,000
total.
total in
Okay,
Illinois.
okay, got it.
In Illinois specifically, they do not have. I mean, I just want to make sure that our data is reflected universal. So you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're the data guy. Help me to understand um, what does that. Am I correct in that or am I off base on that?
um,
Universal, you're gonna make me cheat, man. I'm about to look it up.
yeah, you know what?
No, I'm gonna go with numbers I
The
know.
best the best practice is to verify. So I mean, the numbers that I'm looking at are a difference, are a great difference from that. I mean, the numbers I'm looking at in terms of there's no comparison. Like there's really just no comparison. And when you look at the percentages, right, with the employer share, so that's Hispanic businesses with
Is it close to 163,000 Universal in Illinois? Does that sound right?
Yeah, that. It's closer to that number than 600,000.
And that may have been 600,000. May have been in a particular region.
Yeah.
Yeah, multiple states. But if we're at 163,000 Hispanic-owned businesses, what is their percentage mostly like when it comes to non-employees and employees? And Larry, can you tell us the benefits of, while Universal grabs that, can you tell us the benefits of the one versus the other? Black owned businesses in Illinois only have 3% that have employees that's why we don't see a lot of times when we lose jobs that we have somewhere to go, because
Absolutely.
if you notice, you go to the Chinese restaurants. I hate to pick on them right now, and only Chinese people work there.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
you
Well,
know.
I think the point that we're getting to, or we're trying to take our listening audience to, is that we have more black businesses in the state of Illinois than Hispanics.
Mm-hmm.
But when you take a look at the number of those who have employees in the Hispanic community, their numbers are closer to, if I'm not mistaken, and I can be corrected on this, anywhere from 15 to 18%. That's a significant increase. Now, I already know these numbers that, and this is by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, 80% of black businesses in the state of Illinois do less than $50,000 a year in revenues. That comes from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity that was presented, and actually they had a tour around the state to talk about those numbers. And those numbers were pretty alarming that we have now in comparison, Hispanics at the same level, their numbers per business is close to 284,000, while our numbers are closer to 60 to 70,000. There's a significant gap. Is what I'm pointing out, is that we are behind, even though we fought for most of the legislation. And when you take a look at who wrote most of the legislation for minority business with Perrin J. Milchill and others, we are the workhorses that get things done, but we are the least benefactor of benefiting from it. So we plow the fields just like we did in slavery. We plowed the fields and and fed everybody else, but then we got the scraps. It's the same thing. There's something that we have to ask ourselves on a continuous basis: why? And that's an intelligent question to ask. Why? Why are Hispanics more progressive and more smarter, or there's something
Nah,
amiss here.
we're not gonna put this
No, no,
narrative
no,
out
no,
that they're
no, hold
smarter.
on, hold on, LaDonna Raeh. I didn't say they were. I'm
You
saying
did.
that
It's on
intelligent
it's on
conversation.
video.
You know,
You just said
I'm
it.
saying this to our audience. I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay.
So there must be something else. If we analyze it, what is why is that such a stark difference? It forces us to ask the question, why?
Mm-hmm.
I,
Why?
I,
You,
I,
you
you throw it back in there too. Yep. So I was looking at the white non-Hispanic numbers versus the Hispanic numbers. So my
Okay.
apologies on that. Doc, you hit it right on the head. But I think to answer that question, why that disparity, why that gap, I think it has to do with culture. If I were to really, uh, throw if I were to throw my intuition out there, my gut feeling said there's a really stark difference between the culture that we have internal here as Black Americans versus our Hispanic brothers and sisters.
Okay, but let
I
me ask this question then,
mm-hmm.
to you, Universal, and this is, we're just thinking out loud and we're challenging each other, and we should. This is healthy. The Our culture comes from a culture of slavery where we worked, we worked 14, 16 hours a day. Uh, when people say we were lazy, we built a country. We worked harder than anyone else that we know of. So in terms of our culture, we have a culture of working. But then that's why history becomes so important, to really kind of find the progression of Black evolution and Black political thinking. Because here's the other number I want to throw out to you. And this is just something for thought. Most people may not know, there are 34 Black legislators in Springfield. There's only
12, I think.
14, I think 12 or 14
14.
Hispanics. Yeah, 14 Hispanics, actually, if I'm not mistaken, based upon the last count, give or take one. So we have less Hispanic legislators, and we have virtually 85% more African American legislators. And yet, from an economic perspective for black business, we are still at the bottom of the totem pole.
Let me.
So
I have to
hold on.
interject. No, I have to interject. I
I'm gonna
have to.
interject.
I have to. Nope.
Let me
Nope.
get
Nope.
this one
Nope.
because
Nope. Nope.
you
This
got
is
the first one.
healthy. Nope. This is healthy. Nope. This is healthy. Let me tell you something. When you said that you think it's culture, you're absolutely right. Because we have been submerged and immersed and indoctrinated into white culture, and how white culture treats black people is what we do to each other. What we do not have, or what we have not referred back to or reflected back to, is heritage. Heritage is actually who we are. That's what we inherit. It is innate in us, but we're
Our
not
DNA.
leveraging heritage, we're leveraging culture. Culture is a systematic way of how black people should be treated in this country. That is why we treat each other the same way as white culture.
Well,
I rest.
I'm gonna throw this in there too, right? Like I always say when I talk about health and the data of health, what is the purpose of the health? The purpose of health is to protect our DNA, right? As we continue to age and as the day go by, our bodies begin to erode just because of what we do throughout the day, right? So the integrity of the code of the genetic code, it is strongly dependent on our diet, our lifestyle, our choices, so that it stays intact, so that we can pass that information on to keep it strong and as pure as possible. When we look at when we provide a we analyze that and we look at it akin to us as a people. You know, when we in terms of slavery, there was a set of culture that we had. You know, even though we made up different tribes, the struggle brought us together to understand what we was actually going through. And what happened is over time, right? All it was people were sold, people passed away, people lost that culture, that the heritage that LaDonna is talking about. And so now, as we stand forward, when it comes to what are our best practices when it comes to build business, what are our code based practices of dealing with each other, in family, in business, in worship, so on and so forth, like using a blueprint necessary of how we supposed to deal with each other in toxic environments and toxic spaces. Are we coming together, or are we coming diluted? But I think this is the great challenge of our day. And if we don't figure out the nuances, because business is not just transactional, right? It's relationship, right? And if we're afraid of each other, and if we're applying the Willie Lynch concepts, most people say it's fake, right? But I mean, we can't help to bring it back up. If we are.
Universal, I'm gonna interrupt you. I know you're on a roll, but let me point something out from a historical basis, even going back to the 7 Year War. If you look at the 7 Year War, where we were fighting against the French and the Indians, we were considered British. We were part of the British Empire. And they were proud of that. And when did that shift? Well, it shifts when they felt like they were being taxed unfairly without representation, and they began to call themselves Americans. There was a shift. And when they called themselves Americans, they came together as a common group to fight against the great dictator of Britain. I mean, that was the evolution of how America started. We need to take time to, from a historian point of view, because I think we may be hitting on the surface, but I don't think we've done the direct analysis, because I don't think there's one thing that speaks to the issue of the economic disparity that exists within the black business and the employees. There's a bunch of other factors that you have to consider but you have to at least understand how you got there in order to fix the problem. A psychiatrist sits you down at the table, sits you in the care, and he asks you a lot of questions, your past, your present, and he or she, hopefully, if she's good, helps you to understand and deal with some of your challenges, the self hate, all the other factors that come into play. My question to us has always been built around, and I've struggled with this for my most of my life, is that We have more political clout. We have everything in the world going for us, but our numbers are not reflected.
And the
What's
numbers
going
don't
on?
lie.
Yeah, the numbers are like so. It
Right.
tells us even though we have political clout, and the Black Caucus got to ask itself the fundamental question: how can you call yourself Black Caucus leadership? And these numbers continue to be pervasive. Now they'll say, "Hey, well, that's the black business fault. That's your fault." No, it's not our fault. It's our collective fault. Because if black business isn't growing, and we don't have money, we cannot support our charities. We can't put our kids to school. It's a rippling impact upon our ability to be a part of this American system and the American dream if we're not getting access to capital. And the fact of the matter is that there's countless examples of we fought in the war, came back to GI Bill, and the middle class was born out of that. But blacks who fought in the war and a higher percentage, they were not able to go and buy a home in the middle class. That creates wealth. When you're able to buy a home, that creates wealth. If you're not able to do that, if you don't have access to capital, access to banking, that's one of many problems that we had. And I just simply need us to understand this is a lot more complicated than culture. This is a systematic way of cutting black people out and keep them in a position of weakness until we learn how to become self-sufficient and create a better way of doing business and fix ourselves.
I
Really fundamentally fix ourselves. We're going to
yeah.
have some challenges.
I
You
don't
know, if
agree
you
with
look
you.
at,
I think that culture has a lot to do with it only because those people that are in positions, they act like the other people that are in positions.
You think
So
culture is the only issue that we have, Madonna?
no, no. There's an umbrella of issues that
Okay,
we
I
have.
just
I'm going to
let's be
go
clear.
fight a war and come back to the country I fought the war for and expect a different result. That's insanity. That's insanity. Now, my hat goes off to people who have fought in wars and served in the military. My son is talking about going right now, and I'm so nervous about it because what will change because he did that? The reason is because there's a systematic foundation, even in the Constitution. We were not at the table when that was written, and it was not written on behalf of us. It was written on behalf of them. And one thing that Democrats and Republicans are not going to do, they're not going to come forward and say, we are all the same party. So let me get back to the Democrats, right? Now the Democrats have a subculture. What are these progressive Democrats called? Now the Democrats are fighting Democrats. What are we doing? Okay.
I,
So,
you know, I,
yeah, and they're playing by the rules while Republicans say, forget the rules. We want to keep and retain and maintain our power. And that power is to be rich and powerful. And the only way that they're going to keep us at bay and make money off of black bodies is to keep us following the rules. And that's why our businesses are failing. Our businesses are not doing astronomically well because our $2.1 trillion goes everywhere but us. And when we don't bring it back and we don't have anywhere to bring it back to, that is systematic. That is culture.
well, I think to your point, Ladonna, we another solution we brought to the table with the chamber is called the Black Treasury, right? And what the Black Treasury is taking advantage of is using data, is using technology to be able to say, hey, if we want to be able to change the condition of our current state, we understand that as a collective, all of us as Black Americans, we spend about $2 trillion a year. And the thing is, that's not something to be praiseworthy. I mean, we find the opportunity in the crisis, because if we're spending, we should be spending something to invest back into ourselves, so that we can plant a foundation, so that we can have our own schools, we can have our own healthcare systems, we can buy our own lobbyists, right, to stand for us and whatever issues that we have, that are pertaining to us and our issues. But that can't happen if we're just bleeding out resources. So $2 trillion is we have it, but the Black Treasury aims to be able to take a portion, right? If everyone gets involved with it, our goal is to take 1% of 2 trillion, just 1%, right? And that's rounding up every time you use your card, right? It rounds up, and a percentage of that goes back into the Black Treasury. If we did 1%, what 1% of 2 trillion is what? 1 billion? Is that correct? Right?
That sounds pretty good to me.
Right? So if we did that for a collective
10% would be
clean,
100 billion.
if we collected at a collective of 10 years, right, we would have something to support ourselves collectively as a people. But the issue, as LaDonna so eloquently put it, is that we have to come together. If you want to go quickly, go alone, right? And that's that 96% of solo entrepreneurs. If you want to go quickly, go alone, go. But if you want to go far, you got to come together.
And we got to
And
know
and I
how to come together because,
and
just starting a business by yourself, there's probably a business that's very similar to yours that by a person that looks just
And
like
that's
you.
why the chamber exists, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen,
yes,
because you cannot do this. You cannot win this battle by yourself. And like Bob Dale used to say, black businesses suffer in silence. And about time they get to people let to know how bad off they are, they're already on life support. We have to create, and again, I'm not discounting anything. I think all these things, but I think we have to do a even deeper analysis in terms of just like understanding American history. And when you understand American history
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how you understand how they think, because even in the midst of the war, you know, there were some real debates happening about slavery, about freedom that was creating even a division among themselves. But to understand history and to understand how we got here, it's like, we used to be a culture of people who work closer together. What happened? Why did that change? How did the culture shift? And why? What did the shift happen? We used to vote Republican. Now we vote Democrat. Well, there's something that happened that shift that. It didn't just happen because
Mm-hmm.
it happened because there was a reason for that. Now you have to understand why did it change and what was the basis of the change. And I doubt that we do a very good job of analyzing that, in my
No,
opinion.
absolutely.
and
You're
I
absolutely
agree.
right. I mean,
I agree.
anytime you've got the CEO of the Heritage Foundation with an African American master's degree, and he ain't black, by the way, and he is the mastermind behind Project 2025, and we're studying what? We're trying to be Greeks. We're trying to do everything outside of who we are, versus understanding exactly who we are.
And that's why I like what Dr. Ken Harris said on the last show. We were working on Project 30, 2035. We have to have our plan. And if you don't have a plan, you're simply going on. You're like the wind at the mercy, you're like a leaf at the mercy of the wind.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a strategy. The chamber has a strategy. We hope that the Black Caucus understands that the chamber has impacted billions of dollars into the hands of black business. And quite frankly, we know that there's a design. People say a lot of things about the Black Chamber of Commerce. They're, all, but that's designed to keep you from understanding who we are and what we represent in
Yeah.
terms of fighting for black business. And there is no organization, from my perspective, and I can be biased because obviously I'm one of the leaders in of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. But the work we do and the analysis we do and the understanding of procurement is virtually superior to many other organizations. We know it backwards and forward better than most other people know it. We analyze the numbers. But when it comes to support from the caucus, there is fundamentally no support. Why? Because it's about keeping us weak, keeping us divided. And whites have done a good job of divide and conquering. And if we allow ourselves, it could be easily, we three could be together and someone can say something and you not even check it, Ladai. Someone could come up to you and say, Larry and Universal think that you're a terrible person. Now, you didn't verify none of that, but you
Well,
internalize it. And then
yeah,
all of a
that's
sudden now there's a division.
yeah,
We have to
that's
be
uh
careful what people say about us.
that's collateral
Well, I
information when you don't check it. Now, I got to go back to your 2 trillion dollars because zeros get tripped up in my head. Okay, I can't do it on the spot, but it looks like that's actually is that $20 billion
that's
when
20
you say
billion now.
1% of two
Just
trillion
one
dollars.
percent. Just 1%.
Yeah,
Everybody.
yeah,
Everybody. If you put it in together, this is what we could have collectively to work for us. Because right
that's a
now,
lot of money.
r-
Uh,
it's 2 trillion is a lot of money wasted. It's
Yeah,
not coming back. For an example, right?
I like
Larry
that.
said something that was very important. When I grew up in my little small town in rural South Carolina, we had Mr. Bobo. It was a black owned business. He sold candy for 15 cents. What happened to that in Chicago? Where Mr. Bobo's at? Where they at? Where
He's
they at?
gone.
You
He's
can't
gone.
find them. Now, so the fact that you can't find them, it means that that money is not going back inside the community.
But,
And
why,
we,
but the question is, the intelligent question is, what happened to him? Why? And what happens is that as society continues to grow, you have big box stores who had the pricing power and the ability to put more things in the store, and they did a job of getting black traffic because they were probably targeting, like marketing people do, targeting people to get them to come in the store and buy goods and services.
my point is though, we could be running the BP stores in our community. We could
Absolutely.
be running the gas stations in our community. We could be right leaving out of high school, right? Like, and if you look at the numbers of how much these gas companies make in the company, right, coming out of high school, that's something that a young person can do,
Let
right?
me
Then
let me
rather look for something or try to find something that they can't find that's not there.
I agree with you, but we have to be focused. I remember hearing when I was growing up, keep your eyes on the prize. I had a conversation yesterday with a Caucasian person yesterday, and he said that the only reason that Africans were enslaved is because their military wasn't strong enough. And I said, wait, go back. And I just want to make a point. It wasn't because our military wasn't strong enough. It's because we were taken out of our habitat intentionally and brought over to a new habitat and stripped of our old heritage to work for them. That was all by design. That was all intentional. We
Yeah.
have to have intentionality in order to have a place to boycott. If you boycott Wall or Target, you got to have somewhere to go to. Is it Walmart? It's just the same thing.
Well,
So
I
we
think
have to be intentional.
I think what he was saying, LaDonna, is that if we had strong military, they could have never come and taken some of the people from Africa because we could have met them at the shores. But the same thing with the Native Americans. Native Americans were the end of their own by welcoming uh, Caucasians to the U.S. because they did not fight them, they befriended them and helped them. And as they helped them, they did not understand that the king's objective was to get more land and to become more dominant. And this was fertile land. And even when they had the seven, when they had the 13 colony, the U.S. said, "Look, here's the only place you guys can go," because Native Americans had 85% of the rest of it, and they were not allowed to go. And the settlers said, "Look, there's fertile land in South Dakota, every place else in Mississippi." So they continued to move forward. As they moved forward, the military had to protect them as they moved forward because they were part of the key. They were part of Britain. So as they moved forward, military come in to protect them when the Native. So there's a lot more to this story, guys.
Yeah, thanks for the
Yeah,
history lesson, but that wasn't the totality of our conversation. I ended up cussing them out and hanging up. But I will tell
okay.
you about it offline, okay? There was more
Okay.
of it than that. It is 9:59. How would you like to close the show, Larry? Cuz people need to get to our
Well,
website. They need to know about our conference. There's some things going on.
well, I think the intelligent question that Black people ought to always ask themselves is that when you do a competitive analysis and we're way behind, the question that should come to yourself is saying why, and then begin to figure out and how do you make it better. Because just like we go with the Department of Transportation and we look at the numbers and the numbers say we're not doing well, okay, well, we're not doing well. So what are we going to do, Department of Transportation and leadership, to give us a better opportunity, whether it be the Capital Development Board, whether it be the Tollway, whether it be CMS. Our job as a chamber is a push for equity and fairness and to understand the rules of law and put more money in the hands of Black people. That's what we have to continue to do, to continue to fight for. And we ask people to join us in the fight for economic reciprocity for Black people in America.
I love that. All right, Universal Prather, thank you so much for joining us today. Larry Ivory, Dr. Larry Ivory, President, CEO of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for allowing this platform to be on WVON 1690. I want to thank all of you for listening. We did get a caller at the last minute, but we were not able to get to you, Brian, but I'll give you a call. As we celebrate the 4th of July, we talked about a lot of stuff. American fights, Black American fights. Today is just not about blaming people. It's about building a stronger Black community of businesses. Think about it. When you start a business, who can you start a business with so that you can employ more people? We can't change until we change it. I made more money in my business when I hired people versus when I laid them off. So a special thank you to all of you for allowing us to have this conversation, come into your ear each and every Saturday. And we will see you next week. Make sure you keep it safe. All right? That's it. Thank you to our sponsor, Wind Creek Chicago Southland.
Well,
Bye
hey,
bye for
hey.
now.
Bye bye.
Barriers and illuminate the path towards a more inclusive tomorrow. Follow us across the socials at The Wake Up Show Chicago. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. It's The Wake Up Show every Saturday morning at 9. Change begins with every sunrise. Welcome to The Wake Up Show Chicago.